Are you better? Are we live? Okay. Welcome, everybody. Notice is hereby given pursuant to the Texas Open Meetings Act, Vernon's annotated civil statute, Article 625217, that the city of Smithville will conduct a special call council meeting April 30th, 2025 at 5 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall, 317 Main Street, Smithville, Texas. I call this meeting to order. Are you good? It's okay. Discussion and action on a resolution to amend the performance statement for TDA contract CRC 220031. Take it away, Robert.
Yes, Council and Mayor, CRC 332201 is the Innovation Center grant. We are submitting a contract extension, the number of days or construction. Originally, the facility was supposed to be completed by June 19th. With issues with getting supplies, this, that, and the other, we're going to extend that contract to September 30th. And you get one extension. So we want to make sure that we have enough time for this facility to be completed. Part of this extension also requires us to remove a statement that said we were going to use some of the grant funding for facades. That wasn't eligible. So as such, the performance statement is going to remove the allocation of $5,000 for facade grants to be used elsewhere. So that's what the resolution is doing. I would appreciate you passing that.
You need a
Questions?
motion?
Yes. Don't know.
I make a motion that we amend the a resolution to amend the performance statement for TDA contract CRC 22-0031.
I'll second that motion.
Motion been made and second. All in favor?
Mayor, I'm going to abstain because of a newly positioned on the board at workforce training.
Will you please note that Councilman Etheridge? Okay. Kathy was a yes. 2, 3. Therefore are yes and one abstained. Next item, President.
Excuse me,
No.
Jill, would you please get that to Angela, the signed copy? Yeah, the deadline's today, by the way, to get this in. So, thank you. Yeah. All right, great. Okay.
Okay, so
we can
Ready?
move on.
presentation from Reuse on its advanced membrane bioreactor technology and its potential to help the city of Smithville's wastewater management.
Okay, Council and Mayor, let me set this up a bit. This is technology that's been out there, probably 5 to 10 years. A group came through about 6 years ago. The technology was extremely expensive and unproven. Since then, as you know, we've been going through a wastewater treatment expansion study and have a good picture of what it's going to look like 20 years down the road. Got a hold of these folks, and as the mayor said, this is membrane bioreactor technology. Basically, what their technology does is reduces the footprint and cuts the cost. You can, and they're going to go through this, but you can eliminate a clarifier using membranes, and we've also have individual from Train. This group does do a soup to nuts proposition from design, construction, and financing that we will be reviewing tonight. So from Reuse is Randall Nelson and Gabby Bolaños. And from Train, we have Robert Hanvey. I'll turn this over to Mr. Randall if you want to start off, or actually Gabby. Somebody's driving. I'm not sure who is, but okay. Let's wait to make sure the slides, they're up. Okay, thank you.
And I was told I could walk around, so I'm just going to carry this around. So first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I will make one correction, and that is the technology that we're talking about has been around for about 35 years now in its current form. So there's all kinds of improvements. It has just in the last probably 5 or 6 years gotten common to Texas, but the systems have been around for a very long time. So it's not necessarily new technology. It's technology that this particular area is just unfamiliar with. So we're going to try to get you a little more educated. So I'm sorry, Robert. Well, I started off on the right foot. So I like to educate, because I think, having more information, is going to be, critical to your decisions moving forward. So when we talk about wastewater, I'd like to really kind of ask a question. When you think about waste, or do you even think about wastewater? Is it until you get to one of those times where it's critical? Most people don't think about wastewater, they flush, it goes somewhere, somebody else has to deal with it. And in most cases, it's kind of one of those stepchilds that you don't want to talk about, right? It's an afterthought. Wastewater is, in most people's view, it's a byproduct. And it's just a thing that you have to deal with. So I really want to emphasize this. We don't look at wastewater that way. We see wastewater as a resource, one of our greatest untapped resources. When I look at what you're doing right now, all that water that is coming out of the back end of your wastewater treatment plants, where does it go? What are you doing with it? Do you realize that's a resource? Do you realize that's something that has value, has benefit, but only if it's treated right? Only if you take it to a certain level. All right. So with that being said, reuse, you don't have the TV and you can see the screens, right? Or you can't see the screens. Okay. Well, I have 3 daughters. No, I'm just teasing. So we literally, we see wastewater as a resource. And so everything that you're going to hear tonight, I'm going to give you an education of how wastewater is treated typically. But I'm also going to explain the difference in what a conventional plant does and what we do, because I think at the end, when you notice and understand the dramatic differences, you're going to see why we can not only save the city significant amount of money in these projects, but actually provide you with something that has great value on the backside as well. So we look to bring value on the front end and value on the back end. All right. That being said, so I asked Jim when I got here, and he shared with me that he's been around wastewater, so he has a fairly good understanding of wastewater. But I'll ask the rest of you, do you know how wastewater is treated? If you went, Mitchell, you go by Mitchell? If you went to a wastewater treatment plant, could you explain to me what's going on? Okay. Tyrone? No. Okay. I'm going to explain to you today what's going on at that wastewater treatment plant. So at that wastewater treatment plant, it's doing the same thing there that you're doing right here, right? Everything, when you consume, everything that you are consuming, the breaking down of those organics starts right here, right? And then when you void, I like that word. Somebody in one of our presentations came up with that. When you void that out, it goes through a collection line and it goes to the wastewater treatment plant where you're continuing that process, but you're enhancing it. And I'll get to that in a second. But everything that you're doing here goes with it, right? So all the biology that's in your system, when you void that, it goes to the wastewater treatment plant. So all the organics, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, the carbon that we're consuming, and all that biological activity that's occurring inside our system is going to the plant, and we're continuing that there. Now, how you do that is critical. So in any wastewater treatment system, there's 2 critical functions. And it doesn't really matter. I could take you to 100 different plants. You have 2 critical functions. You have a biology, which I just kind of briefly touched on, and you have water solid separation. So I'm gonna lean kind of heavily into the biology and kind of work through that biology with you so you understand it better. And then we're going to get to the water solid separation, which is the key to what we're talking about with Smithville, all right? So from a biological standpoint, if I were to take you to your wastewater treatment plant and you look at it, if you were standing on top of that tank, that water should look brown, right? Not trying to make jokes here. I am from Louisiana, so, we could come up with those. But Tyrone, what are you looking at when you look down in the wastewater and you see all this brown? Huh? What are you looking at? When you're looking at a wastewater treatment plant, you see all that brown in there. What do you think you're looking at? Okay, all right. Well, that's what most people think of, right? Right. They think, well, it's poo. It's brown. It's got to be poo. It's not. It's not. It's not. In fact, if you were looking at the water that's actually coming into the treatment plant, it actually is, it almost kind of looks clear, right? It's kind of a tinted yellow, tinted color water, and so it doesn't look like what we would think. But it's because a lot of that water is coming from showers. A lot of that water is coming from laundry. A lot of that water is coming from your cooking and other functions. So the water coming in is actually not too terribly strong. But when you're looking at that water and it's really nice and brown, what you're looking at is biology. You're looking at the bugs. So I go back to what I started with, that biology that started right here. When we void, it's those bugs that are populating in there. So you want to create in any wastewater an environment where those bugs will explode in population and consume the organics. That's what you're trying to do. Now you can, you treat ammonia or nitrogen one way, you treat phosphorus a different way, and you have different processes within there. But all in all, what you're trying to do is create an environment so that your bugs, your biology can grow, can mature, and can consume all of those organics that's in that wastewater. That's how you treat the wastewater. That's how you treat those organics. But then you get to a point where, okay, well, now I have to send water come in every day, so I've got to get water going out. Well, that's where we come to the water solid separation. You guys are using clarifiers, and that's what most people see. That's what most people think of, these big round clarifiers, right? Well, Tom, can I pick on you since I picked on this side? Okay. Can you explain to me how a clarifier works? No idea. Again, I'm from Louisiana. I grew up on a farm in the country, so I'm going to give you a real simple explanation of how a clarifier works, right? You have a big pond on your land. You get a really heavy rain. What happens to the color of that water in the pond? It what? Turns green, turns brown, whatever the soil color is, right? It matches it. Why? Because there's sediment in there, right? If you had rain for 3, 4, 5 straight days, is that water going to clear up? No. But what happens if you give it 3 days, 4 days, and nice sunshine? What happens to the water in that pond? Clears up. Why? Because it settles. Exactly. Your clarifier works on that same principle, right? And 99% of it, right? What you're trying to do is again, let's go back. You're trying to create an environment where as water comes in, you're trying to give that water slow movement and time for the solids to settle down. And then you want the water, has a barrier, has to go down and up and over, and has to come out clear on the other side. So you're trying to make your clarifier do what that pond would have done naturally over several days, but now you've got to do that 24 hours a day, right? Well, what happens if you get in your pond, again, heavy rains for 3, 4, 5, 6 straight days? You're not going to get settling. Same thing with the clarifier. It is a passive separation of water solids. So if I have a heavy weekend, July 4th, Thanksgiving, if I have some other formality, or if I have just weekends and I get a lot of water hitting that clarifier, it may not work right? It may not be quite as effective as it is at other times because you're not giving that water time or the solids time to settle, or the water is moving too fast through that clarifier. If I'm an engineer like Brian, what I'm going to do is I'm going to oversize that clarifier, or I'm going to put some kind of a equalization basin in front of that so that when those peaks come in and I start getting those quote unquote heavy rains at it, then I give basically what I'm trying to do is hold that water back and time dose that treatment plant over time so that we don't upset the clarifier, right? So we don't overrun the clarifier. So that's in essence what we're trying to do. When water comes in, biologically, We're trying to create an environment where the biology is consuming the organics, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, the carbon, those type of things. But we're also trying to do it in such a way that when we do send water to the clarifier daily, that it is creating an environment where we get slow movement of water, solid settling down, and water going over. Okay. That design has been used effectively for probably close to 100 years, maybe a little bit more than that in some form. When you go back and look, the technology we're talking about today changes all of that, every bit of it. So you start with the clarifier. That's where everything in a good, well-designed treatment plant starts. You start the clarifier, you look at what your peaks are, and you work backwards from there. You design the rest of the treatment plant to fit whatever you think your peak flows are going to be heading to the clarifier. Same thing with a membrane plant, except with a membrane plant, I don't need to worry about holding that water back. And I'll tell you why. With a membrane, we actually have, you have it? We actually have with our membranes a active barrier, an active restraint. So I talked about the clarifier being a passive process. The membrane is an active process. It is actually a physical barrier that will not allow solids to make it through. This is the membrane, right? So it feels like wax paper. Okay. In order for water to go through that, it has to pass through a 0.038 micron pore size, 0.038. Well, what is that? Human hair on average is about 100 microns. She has it up here. So grain of salt, 60 microns. White blood cell, 25. Red blood cell, 7 to 8 microns. Viruses and bacteria, 0.1 micron to a 0.2 micron. Our membrane pore is 0.038 microns. So what does that mean? Well, that means viruses will not pass through the membrane. Bacteria will not pass through the membrane. The only thing that's going to make it through that membrane is water or anything that is of a molecular structure smaller than a 0.038 micron. So nitrogen dissolved in water will make it through. You know, phosphorus dissolved in water will make it through. Some of your pharmaceuticals, the molecular structure on some of the pharmaceuticals are so large they won't make it through. Some are smaller and they will. PFAS, that's a big thing everybody talks about, right? EPA's trying to figure that out. It's going to be a while before they figure it out. PFAS is a short chain molecule. It'll pass through. But bacteria won't make it through. Viruses won't make it through. Solids won't make it through. So how does that change things? Well, if we know that those things aren't going to make it through, well, then all we really care about then at that point is hydraulically, do we have a design that will allow those peaks hydraulically of all that water to come through without compromising the biology inside the plant? And the short answer to that is yes. So with our membranes, we operate them in a very conservative operational range. Meaning when you have, oh, you can leave it right there, Gabby. When we have those peak flows in the morning, in the evening, when everybody's getting ready, or on the weekends, we don't worry about that because as the flow starts coming in faster, we simply speed up on the backside how fast we're pulling the water out. So we're just worried about passing the water through it hydraulically, but we're not worried about the solids because they're not going to make it out. The viruses aren't going to make it out. Bacteria is not going to make it out. Well, if we know that, then how does that change the way the plant looks? How does that change the way the plant's designed? This is a good example of a treatment facility that is of similar size to the one of these you have here. All right. The one on the left, that's a 250,000 gallon per day plant. I think you guys have a 300. Am I doing it right? Yeah, but the size of the plant. All right. Now, I talked about the way that people handle those peaks. I think your plant is designed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or I saw you shaking your head. Who's on the wastewater side? Okay, so your clarifier looks like your clarifier is oversized. You don't have an EQ basin, right? Okay, so they chose what we talked about earlier. One of the two ways you can handle equalization is either an EQ basin up front or oversize the clarifier. You chose to oversize the clarifier. This one, they chose to size the clarifier for the average, and they have an EQ basin here to handle those peaks. But the footprint still stays about the same. Okay, when you talk about the membranes, well, we don't need the EQ basin anymore, right? So we take we don't need the clarifier. That's the first thing. We replace the clarifier because we've gone from a passive separation of water solids to an active separation of water solids. So we don't need the clarifier. So that goes. Next goes the EQ basin. We don't need an equalization basin. Then we get rid of the sludge digestion. Now, you guys aren't doing sludge digestion here, are you? You are. Okay. Are you hauling the sludge away? Drying beds. Okay. We eliminate the drying beds. Would that be helpful? Okay. So, and I'm gonna speak in some terms that these guys hopefully will help me with. One of the reasons we're able to eliminate the sludge is because you're operating your plant. And again, for some of you, I know this is foreign language, so I'm trying to get to where it's a little bit more understandable, but you're operating within a certain range on mixed liquor. Mixed liquor is just a way we measure the percentage of solids or, bacteria or, biology that's in the water versus the water. So you're operating around 3,500 to 4,500 mixed liquor, which means I've got about a 0.35% solids to a 0.45% solids. The rest of it's water. Doesn't look like it, but that's really how much solids is in there. It's very, very low. Well, in order to do sludge digestion, you have to thicken that up, right? If you're going to take it out of the drying beds, you got to thicken that up to 1.5% solids, 1.2, 1.5% solids, right? Our plant operates at 1.2 to 1.5% solids, right? That's what our operating range is, not 3,500 to 4,500 mixed liquor, but we operate between 9,000 and 16,000 on the mixed liquor. So we don't have to have sludge digestion, and we provide a sludge press so that you can turn it into solids right there at the system. It goes into a dumpster and gets hauled to the landfill. Would that save you any time? Okay. So we've eliminated the sludge digesters. Then we're gonna reduce the actual process volume by about 50%. And it's because of these operational parameters that we're talking about. So we're going to reduce that, and we reduce any kind of chlorine contact, which is disinfection. One of the things about a passive separation like the clarifier is you still have some stuff going out with the water, right? You still have bacteria, viruses. So you got to disinfect it some way. Well, I would guess you're using some type of a chlorine for disinfection, right? But we eliminate that. Why? Well, we've already shown you that the viruses and bacteria, they're not going to make it through. But also the water is extremely clear. I mean, extremely clear. Thus, we can use UV disinfection. And so by using UV disinfection, we eliminate all the cost of the chlorine that you're having to use. And the UV disinfection, for size plant that you guys are looking at, I don't know what y'all spend on chlorine every year, but the UV runs around $1,500 a year to replace the bulbs. Somewhere around that range, right? Okay, so we eliminate all the chlorine. Then we reduce the equipment. If I were to go back and show you, there's piping everywhere, there's pumps everywhere, there's blowers everywhere, all kinds of equipment. Go ahead, Gabby. Ultimately what we're doing is we're taking and we're reducing all of that. And just to give you an example, what you're seeing on the screen there is basically a 200,000 gallon per day plant that the entire plant is 32 feet by 36 feet. 32 by 36. That is a really small footprint. You have any idea what size footprint you guys have for your plants? It's probably bigger than 32 by 36. Yeah.
What percent reduction of the footprint do you?
Typically, we reduce the footprint by about 60%, sometimes more. It really depends on a couple of factors. It depends on if you have an EQ basin, how big your chlorine contact chamber is, several different factors, but we're going to reduce it by at least 50 to 60%. We have seen plants that are reduced by as much as 70% on the footprint total. This is just a kind of a visual, if you will, of how the membrane works. I'll let Gabby hit the play button. So the water, we put a vacuum on that membrane. You still have it out? Where'd it go? Yes, here we go. So we put a vacuum on the center part here. So this is a hard corrugated inner component that we put a vacuum on, and that vacuum pulls the water through this membrane into the center part and out. But as you can see, viruses won't make it out, bacteria won't make it out, solids won't make it out. So that's in essence what we're doing. We're putting a gentle vacuum on the surface of the membranes and pulling the water into the membrane and out. Okay, keep going, Gabby. All right. So here's an example of one of our plants. It's down in Castroville area, San Antonio. So this is for a residential subdivision. Now, this is a 200,000 gallon per day plant. And what you're going to see on all of our plants, they're all going to look very much the same. It doesn't really matter the size, whether it's a 200,000 or 2 million gallon per day plant, they just shrink or grow, right? So the footprint itself changes based on the volume, but the way it looks and the way it's designed pretty much stays the same. If you look at the top, we have screens. Then that's where when the incoming influent hits it, we screen out all the trash that we don't want, and that drops it into a dumpster, and that's a fully automated system. It goes into an anoxic basin, and that anoxic basin is one of our primary processes. When we talk about, I started off with the biology. The anoxic basin serves a critical function in wastewater. The anoxic basin is where we're going to do most of our phosphorus removal. And it may not make a huge difference to you today, but 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it is going to make a big difference. What we're seeing is that one of the key things that the state of Texas, TCEQ, is cracking down on is phosphorus limits, even cities. I will tell you that most of them that are coming out now, if they're hitting the Colorado River, which yours will, you're probably going to see on either your next renewal or the one after that, you're probably going to see your phosphorus limits drop to a 0.5. We see up in the Austin area, they have phosphorus limits as low as 0.015, which is impossible without chemical, a way of doing it chemically. But most of the plants that we're seeing now are a 0.5. You're not there yet, but you will be eventually because TCU is cracking down on that. This anoxic basin is a critical part of that process in order to help foster bacteria that loves to eat phosphorus. And so in our plants, we typically average a 0.4 on our phosphorus effluent, which I understand is foreign language to you guys, but over here, you guys understand that, right? So they'll appreciate that. But then we go from our anoxic then to our aerobic basin. And this is where we introduce oxygen into the system. Now, Kathy, I've picked on everybody else. What good does oxygen do in a system? Why do we add oxygen to it?
Provides air into it.
Well, it does. What good does the air do us though? Or should I get one of these guys to explain it? Okay. All right. So let me tell you about, let's go back to biology, right? When those bugs are coming in, there's no oxygen in your gut, right? There's no, so you have anaerobic bacteria in your gut. That same bacteria is still anaerobic when it's going through that collection system. It's still anaerobic when it hits that treatment plant. Now, let me tell you about anaerobic bacteria. Anaerobic bacteria are like my dad. He's 6'4", 350 pounds. He sits in his chair. He does not need much food to survive. In fact, he could probably go 8 or 9 months and he'd still be just fine. He might look a little bit more like Tyrone here, but he would be just fine. He's got enough capacity in there that it's not going to bother. Anaerobic bacteria are the same way. They're going to eat very slowly. But when you introduce oxygen into that process, what you're doing is you're turning those bacteria, Kathy, into the Michael Phelps of the world. You know, the ultra athletes that have to consume 10, 12, 15,000 calories a day in order to just make it through the day. So when you introduce oxygen, what you're doing is you're creating an environment where the biomass will consume the organics 10 times faster, 15 times faster, 20 times faster. So depending on how you deliver that oxygen into the water, you're actually giving the microbes in there fuel to change their biology, and they'll consume the organics faster. So we employ fine bubble diffusion. I'm not going to get into that. It's another whole discussion. Let's just say it is the most efficient that there is. But we do that so that we can, again, we can energize, we can make sure we have a robust system there. And then we go to the membranes, and that's where the key is. These membranes are the key to the whole thing. When we submerge the membranes down in the water and we put the vacuum on them, they will pull out of that nice brown mixture water. Yes, it has a little bit of dissolved nitrogen in it. It'll have some dissolved phosphorus in it, but it is water. It's going to be clean water. It is a resource. Jim, would you like to have clean water coming out of your plants? That's a resource. You saw the video I showed you. That's coming from this plant. I showed Jim a video. I'll show it to you guys as well. But from this plant, they're producing water that goes into those green tanks that's up here in the upper left. And those green tanks are going out to the community, and that's what they're using to irrigate all their homes. Well, what does that do to their potable water system? Well, they've just reduced their demand for potable water in that subdivision by at least 40%. Because now they're using this water, not effluent. It is effluent. Technically, TCQ's listening, it's effluent. But it's water. They're using water to irrigate all their systems, all their lawns, right? More importantly, they're not paying potable water rates. They're actually paying about 60% of the potable price for this water. So they're reducing their water bill overall, and they're reusing this water, but in a way that helps fund the system because they're using the water, they're basically using it as a utility, but the homeowners still save money, the utility saves money. It's a win-win for everybody. They couldn't do that if they had some of the conventional systems, especially some of the older plants. Couldn't do that. With this, they can.
What's your distribution system to getting the second type of water to the homes?
Yeah, you'll have a second distribution system. It's going to be a lot smaller system. It's going to be a lot more effective system. But there is a cost.
Instead of
You do.
deliverables.
You do. And each home would have 2 meters.
Okay, but
Right. You're right. Each home would have 2 meters. You'd have a potable meter and you'd have a reuse meter. So there is cost up front for the developer. You're probably paying it back in about a year's time from the potable water rates that you're saving on. Yes, ma'am. Well, okay, so from a reuse side, no, we focus on the plant, right? So in this case, the developer and the utility work together. They had their civil engineer, whoever their civil engineer was designing the rest of the collection and infrastructure and all that, did that as well. We focus on the treatment plant itself, everything associated with the treatment plant. Yeah, which again,
can you speak into the microphone so we could hear that?
and again, I come back to kind of where we started is the water coming out the backside. It's water, right? You may not need it today. but at some point you probably will. And it's your water. You know, I would be encouraging you, think about how could we use it? You know, where could we use it? You know, is there any way to use it? Yeah, you'd have to invest into some, you know, again, some additional lines or stuff like that. And ultimately you may decide we don't need that. You know, we've got enough water, but it's a resource. So just kind of keep it in your thought.
About cleaning it up so it could be potable.
The state has a methodology, direct potable reuse, where you can actually do that. Right now, they let you blend a certain percentage, and it's arbitrary. You know, kind of as a standard, the state says, well, you can blend 25% of effluent to 75% freshwater ahead of your water treatment plant, and then it goes through the water treatment plant, and so you can reuse it. And I say that 25% is arbitrary because there is no set rule that says how much it can be. I think it was back, Big Spring, Texas, may have been the first one to do that many, many years ago. And that's what was said at that time. And they just kind of gone with that since then. Now there's legislation that's going through that could increase that because there's legislation actually deeming this type of effluent as a water source. Whether it makes it out of, you know, committee and makes it to the full vote in the legislature, we don't know yet, but it's possible.
I hear a lot of people come to get our water because it's pretty cheap and they use it to, you know, on roads and everything else. Is there a way this could be used in action like that for people to use on roads as long as they weren't putting it back to drinking water?
Yes, yes. So Texas has basically an adder, an addendum to your permit. It's a 210 reclaimed water system. And if you meet certain levels, type 2, type 1, et cetera, which this meets all of those, then you can use it in a number of activities. You know, that's one of them. You can, again, I go back, you could use it in parks, recreational areas. You could use it for a number of different things. But yes, you can use it for construction, dust control, things of that nature.
Is it all a thing like? Can some residents choose to have the second meter and others not, or is it all or nothing kind of?
Yeah, I think if you're going to put the infrastructure in, you have to just plan on it's going to go for everybody. You know, that's my opinion. That's just an opinion. But I don't think you spend all that cost without, you know, making sure that everybody has that access to it. Okay, keep going. All right, keep going, Gabe. We're gonna try to get through this because I was told at the very beginning by Sharon to, you know, not talk long. Okay, which I've already I've blown past that. Okay, I've blown it. This is our effluent, right? This is what that plant that you just saw. This is the water that's coming out of that plant. We had that water tested at one time. We ran a full water panel for VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And when you just, now I'm only talking about VOCs, but it actually met US safe drinking water standards. That's how clean it is. It is. Would you drink it with me, Sharon? Ah, you guys would drink it with me, wouldn't you? All right. Yeah. I'll take you to any one of our plants and I'll drink the water coming out of it. I will. Well, the reason is I know what's not in it, right? It's not about, I know there's no bacteria in there. There's no viruses in there. Some dissolved nitrogen, that's fine, dissolved phosphorus, you know, but I come out, I grew up in Louisiana, so I've drank a lot worse, you know? Right. So let's kind of get to what we can show them. So for you guys, what does that mean? I went into all that to show you. Keep going, Gabby. So right now, at the Gasly wastewater treatment, currently permitted for 0.5, and you're processing approximately 0.162, right? Okay. The proposed upgrade is construct a new 0.5 MGD MBR facility. Then at the Willow plant, currently permitted for 0.3, processing 0.141, and proposed upgrade is to construct a new 0.5 there as well and amend the permit for the increased discharge. So let's, and then of course the lift station improvements. So keep going. All right. So currently, if you look to the upper left, that's what you have for your conventional plant. You've got your bullseye plant that has the clarifier, has your aerobic, all that there, and then you have your sludge drying beds over to the left. If you look to the right, inside that white box, we gotta be focused, do the outline of just the plant. Nope, that's the white box, just the plant right there. That's a 500,000 gallon per day plant right there. Now that includes the automated screens, that includes a sludge press, that includes all your equipment. We even have inside the white box a room for a new office, storage space, et cetera, et cetera. But that entire 500,000 gallon per day treatment plant, if you look to the left there, inside the white box, is smaller than your current 300,000 gallon per day plant, right? And it is going to be more efficient. Everything is fully automated. It has a full SCADA system so that if you wanted to check it at 2 in the morning, at 2:59 a.m. in 37 seconds, you can pull it up on your computer and you can see every flow meter. You can see what mixed liquor you're running. You can see what your dissolved oxygen is. You can see how much water is coming in or how much is going out. You can see the life expectancy on your UV bulbs. You can see everything in that plant from your computer. So it is fully remote operational. All right. You guys don't get any remote operating capabilities. They do. But it's fully SCADA system. So you can see and do anything that you could at the plant, you can do remotely as well. All right. But the beauty of this, and okay, let's stay there. So Willow, currently, your plant is there to the bottom left. And this is just a different style. You got a 0.5 up there to the right. Again, that yellow line inside the white box is the actual footprint of the plant. The white is just kind of show you, here's what we do. And this is what we're doing for your neighboring city up the road. This is what we do for a lot of our municipalities. These treatment plants are typically completely under roof. We put them under roof for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is once we have the construction to a point where the concrete tanks are poured, and if we go ahead and put just a red iron building over the top of them, and I'm not talking about an enclosed building, but just under roof, then we know that we can work there for the rest of the time in the dry. So it saves us typically 2 months of construction time because we can work, if we needed to, we could work 24 hours a day. But we also have lighting under there, so we can actually work. We're not limited by daylight hours. We're not limited to weather events, et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing is all of this equipment in there is going to be heavy equipment. And so underneath that roof is a monorail crane that if you need to pick any particular equipment up, you can just pick it up and move it out to the end and set it down. So it's kind of an operator friendly type of situation. We're trying to make it good for these guys over here. So
How much did you reduce the footprint by?
if you look footprint, we reduced yours by 50. We doubled the size in less than the same footprint.
So I'm seeing a 67% increase in capacity. You went from 300,000 to 500,000, 67%, and a 50% reduction in footprint.
Yes, sir.
Does that allow for future expansion without building more plants to handle future growth and demands?
It would be size for 500,000 gallons per day, but you have room. I can show you on this site right here. You have room just in that small footprint that you have there. I could grow that to about 4 million gallons per day.
And that's what I'm saying. So without buying new land.
That's correct.
it can Make us much more efficient with the utilization of the current footprint.
Yes, sir.
So you decrease the current footprint or usage of the footprint by 50% and increase the capacity or the output by 67%, which allows room, if necessary, to build another unit. And so now we're almost doubling the output or the capacity of the existing land.
Exactly. You are basically doubling the output of the existing land, if not more. And really, actually, probably more because, right now, if you try to grow either one of those two plants, what takes up the most space is your drying beds, right? So I couldn't take that plant and at Willow, I could probably put one more plant of that size there before I'd have to, get new land. With this system, we eliminate those. And so I would argue we're actually saving you a lot more footprint because just those drying beds. I was only looking at the plant to plant comparison. But I would argue that at this site, you might at some point be able to grow that conventionally to about 600,000 gallons a day, whereas with the membranes, you could probably grow it to about 3.5 to 4.5 million gallons a day. So it is significantly more than double on the same footprint, just because you've eliminated, especially those sludge drying beds. Your thoughts? Does that make sense for y'all?
What?
That's the main area that we're taking over there.
Mhm.
Most of our area loss is in the drying beds. If we put a digester, screw press in there, like we've been talking about amongst ourselves, that would eliminate most of your footprint right there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an either or, in my opinion. I think just a screw press right there would take care of a lot of our footprint right there.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I want to look at it more.
Well, and then we kind of revert back to what we started with at the beginning. You could still double your treatment capacity on the same footprint, but when you consider the sludge drying beds, it's more than that. But your point is valid. But you're still being able to double the footprint, even if you went to a screw press or a centrifuge or one of those other methodologies, you're still going to be able to double your capacity at any one of those, if not more than.
So we could effectively address near-term growth needs.
Mhm.
First of all, get us right for the people who live here now. Address near-term growth to the point that if we want to control growth in the future, then if we were to build another plant, then we've probably prepared ourselves, and I don't know the numbers, but I would like to see them at some point to where we could handle the double in the population.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I'm throwing a number at you.
My opinion is, if you have new growth over there near the Willow, you could probably handle at least 4 times to 5 times the growth at that one site. Now, Gasly may be a little bit different. It's kind of an odd configuration, so we'd have to look at that. But I would say at Gasly, you'd still be able to double, potentially triple your capacity at Gasly. Now, here's one of the other, and I don't know, at Gasly, I didn't do enough research on this. I should have. But in most wastewater treatment plants, you also have around the process tankage, a 150-foot buffer that you can't encroach on. Now, that 150-foot buffer is a buffer that is a noise and odor abatement. Really goes back a long ways because, again, most people think, well, they're smelly and, that raw water coming in, it is. And then there's a lot of noise. You have your blowers in buildings, I think, out there. So, that's one of the ways you reduce your noise is by putting them in buildings. The blowers that we have are tri-low blowers. They're in a stainless steel enclosure that has 3-inch sound attenuating foam built into it. So the blowers themselves run around 72 decibels. My voice is around 75. So it'd be about the same level as my voice. So you could stand right next to them and it'd be about the same volume that I'm talking right now, right? So part of that noise and odor abatement is because you don't want to have a nuisance. But there's 3 ways to address noise and odor at the state. The one that everybody picks is a 150-foot buffer. But you can do like we do. You can have sound attenuating enclosures that limit the noise. And you can have ways like our screens are sealed, so you won't have any odor at the screens. Now, if you open them up and you leave them open, you're going to have odor. But if you keep them closed and let them do their job, they're going to be sealed and you won't have any odor. So you can actually effectively reduce your noise and odor abatement buffer around those plants. So you might could gain, Mitchell, you might could gain even more room. My point is, we were considering the buffer that you would have to be contending with at 150 feet. It might be that you could reduce that down to 50 feet instead of 150 feet, and you might could get some more availability on land even with that.
Because we would certainly hate to compete with the train horns.
Well, that's Railroad Commission. Okay, keep going, Gabby. So this is kind of what it would look like. If I were looking at it from a side-on view, your tanks would be submerged. They would be about 4 feet out of the ground. You'd have the catwalks there. You'd have the building overhead with the monorail right in the center of the top of that building. But that's kind of what it would look like. Did you put any pictures in here of what some of our other plants look like? You didn't. We'll get those to you. We have plants that have utilized covers in buildings. Ski resorts, they put one over, it looks like a horse farm. It's in West Virginia, where you've got one in the mountains of Carolina. It literally looks like a high-end log cabin, but they've enclosed these and put shelters around them to, keep them looking aesthetically pleasing. I don't think you need that there, but we're still going to have a building over. We're going to make it look good. The building serves a vital purpose for operational purposes, for construction purposes, but we're still going to make it look good. Wet well, influent lift station, you guys need an upgrade. I'm gonna let Gabby, we utilize a wet well, and then this is really more for the operators than anything. Our wet wells that we design and install are made out of HDPE. So they have 100-year life on the HDPE. We can size them up to 11 feet in diameter and 50 feet deep. They've come fully assembled. And what we really like is what you see in this picture over here. It's called the no vault system. So we don't have an in-ground vault valve, or we don't have the vaults above ground. Can you get to that video? I'm gonna turn your attention to this and let it run for just a second. Okay. Does that look different from what you guys are doing? Yeah, bit. So that's what we would recommend. It is a long life with a HDP. Right now, if you have concrete, you've got to recoat that concrete. Hydrogen sulfide is going to eat away at that thing. And then we always are going to use either stainless steel piping or HDPE. HDPE is going to have, again, a 50 to 100-year lifespan on it. Stainless steel is going to be high lifespan. So different quality all the way around. So that's what we're proposing. When you look at everything that we do, all of our air piping is stainless steel. All of our water piping is stainless steel. All of our controls are stainless steel enclosures. We have our blowers, stainless steel enclosures. UV disinfection, again, is stainless steel. So highest quality that you're going to get, and yet I truly believe we're going to save you guys some significant monies. I'll give you a couple of quick examples, and then we're going to turn it over here to Robert. We had a city up in the Dallas area that they sent out a bid for a conventional plant design. It was a 250,000 gallon per day plant. Now, the city had certain gold-plated requirements that they wanted, to see at that plant, because the developer was paying for it. And so the city was like, well, okay, well, let's just add some things for us in there. So that being said, the bid came in at $17 million. They decided that was way over budget. So they redesigned it as an SBR, sequencing batch reactor, sent it back out for bid. It came in at $15 million. At that point, we were called in because they had heard about us. We went back out for bid the third time with the membrane plant. The bid came in at a little over $9 million for the membrane plant. So they went from 17 down to 15 down to 9. That's how much money we were able to save them. I could go on and on. We've got multiple examples I can give you where we've bid straight up against conventional plants, and we're much cheaper by far on all of them. It's not because of the quality is there. The effluent quality is there. The equipment quality is there. The full SCADA system is there. You get top of the line. It's where you're saving the money is all those construction costs that come along with a conventional plant.
Let me ask you a question. Why would anybody pick the conventional over that?
Tom, I don't think they should. Yeah. My opinion is they should never. All right. Now, why do they still design them? Because the word isn't out enough, right? This is the first time you're hearing about it. We've been around, as a group have been here in Central Texas in Georgetown since 2018. This is the first time you're hearing about it.
Yeah, so you talked about maybe the last 5 to 7 years it kind of came to Texas, I think, if I remember right, but it's been around for a really long time in other parts of the country.
Yes, sir.
So what are the most prominent parts of the country and some cities that use this type of technology exclusively?
Yeah, well, I won't say exclusively, but let's talk about the highest concentration is on the East Coast up in the Philadelphia area, because that's where the membranes, they were produced in Germany. They were built by the German government for the German military. So they brought the technology to the U.S. in 2005. They officed out of Philadelphia area. And so the highest concentration that we have is in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, up through that area, because that's where they started. And then it moved into the Carolinas, and then it moved into Texas. We've got plants from the Outer Banks, all the way to California and Montana down to Castroville. So it has taken a foothold. It's just taken a time for word to get around. I wish I was doing this every single night of the week so I could get the word out faster, but it's just organically growing. It's just osmosis is really what it boils down to.
The city of Bastrop is currently engaged of building a plant as well, correct?
We hope that Sylvia will sign that. I'm gonna get Robert up here. We hope that contract gets signed this week or next week early. Yes. We've been in this process with them for about 4 months.
And to Councilmember Jameson's point, we can get up to 8 times the capacity at Willows. Once you do that and make the conversion, you could demolish the clarifier
Correct.
and add additional space.
Yes.
So I think that's
Correct.
a neat option for us.
Yes.
I have a question. these membranes, and there's 5 of them, right?
Well, there's a lot of them.
Okay, there's a lot of them. What is the maintenance on these membranes? They're working really hard, obviously. And what is the cost to replace these membranes?
Okay,
And how often does that need to happen?
Yeah, good question. So the membranes are built in modules, and each module is basically 28 inches by 28 inches by 42 inches tall. So each module on average could process, if we wanted them to, about 10,000 gallons a day through each module, right? We don't run them that way. We actually run them so that they actually probably only pull about 3,000 gallons a day through the module. We do that because that's the way that we handle those peak flows that we talked about earlier. So if the water starts coming in faster, what we start doing is just pulling the water out faster through those membranes. But in essence, you're going to have about 24 membranes for every 100,000 gallons per day produced, right? So if we have a plant that's 100,000 gallons a day, we're going to put in 24 membranes, knowing that we're going to be able to, if I needed to, just like I talked about with Pearland, if I needed to, that 100,000 gallons a day will pull a lot more than that, 6, 7, 8 times through that, because first of all, we operate at such a low flux rate. So we're only pulling in 3,000 where we could do 10, but also we put in more membranes than we need to. Now, all of that has a reason behind it. And it comes to the last question that you asked, which is how often do you have to replace them, right? Typically, we'll tell everyone in any information we give you, we're going to show you that you need to plan on a 10-year lifespan for those membranes. So when you budget in your operational expenses, you should be setting aside money so that every 10 years you should replace those. Okay. All of our plants, that concentration that you asked about, our oldest plants are up in that area on the East Coast. The first plant, I think, went online sometime 2006. Last year in 2024, they just replaced the original membranes from 2006. So they lasted almost 18 years. That doesn't mean they're all going to last that, but we're seeing that even all the ones that have been in since then, that's the first one where we've started having to replace the original membrane. So we know that real world experience is telling us those membranes are lasting 10, 12, 14, 15 years. But we still tell you to budget for 10, right? If you budget for 10 and they go 15, it's a win-win.
So obviously the cost is a major selling point for this system. What are the downsides when people are evaluating? Because I'm not a technology expert, certainly not on wastewater, but I'm pretty experienced with due diligence processes in general. So typically you would just identify what are all of our options.
Right.
And in this case with wastewater, I guess it would be different types of systems would be the options that are available. What are the options? What are the pros and cons of each one? What are the costs? What are the reliability factors, things like that. So you've got the cost definitely on your side based on those examples. What are the downsides to the system? When you compare it to a conventional system, there's got to be some trade-offs. So what are those so we can understand that?
There's not really trade-offs. What I will tell you is the biggest downside for us is operators. You guys have to pay attention to detail. It is a fully automated system, but the mixed liquor probes have to be cleaned on schedule. The DO probes have to be cleaned on schedule. The maintenance has to be done. We have operators out there that are not as attentive to detail as they should be. And in those plants, we're always having to go in and try to, work with them and get them, okay, you got to do your maintenance. It's like a car. It's an automobile. So you have to do the maintenance on it. Now, if you have, operators that are attentive to detail and do all the maintenance on it, you're going to find it's going to be a fantastic system for a very long time. But the biggest thing is having the right operators. Now, I haven't met you guys. I'm going to assume that you're the best operators we've ever met, and you're going to pay attention to details. So that's really that, but that is key. I don't mean that, and I'm not trying to be derogatory. I promise you. I'm saying that is key. You've got to have operators who will do the maintenance and pay attention to the detail. Biology.
So it'd be characterized as just a little bit more operationally intense than the traditional systems.
The opposite. They will spend less time there, but they do have to make sure that the maintenance is done correctly. For example, let's go back to if you want a screw press, right? A screw press is not something that you can run on Monday and then leave it there and run again on Friday. A screw press, because the way these things work, you have solids that are on the inside. So if you leave those solids in there for 5 days, they're going to be like that black clay out there. They're going to harden up. And that screw press, when you try to run it on Friday, is not going to work right. So you want an operator who's going to run it every day, for 2 or 3 hours every day, and make sure that you're wasting out the sludge when you should be, right? Or if you're going to have some downtime, it's real easy. You take the top off, you take a high pressure washer, and you just clean it off so that those solids then get washed back into the system and they're not building up. If you don't do one of those two things, you're going to have a problem with the sludge press. Second thing, the membranes have to be cleaned at least once every 4 months. Now it's in place. You don't have to take them out, but they need to be backfilled, backwashed every 4 to 6 months and make sure they're cleaned. If you don't do that, then your pressures are going to get super high and you're going to have some problems operationally. You get things like mixed liquor. If you want to run it at 20,000 mixed liquor, it's okay. You can do it, but you can't produce as much effluent coming out the backside as you could if you're running it at 15,000 mixed liquor. So my point to all this is it's a treatment plant like any treatment plant. It really will function as designed perfectly if you have good operations. It is less intense. I will let you talk to any one of our operators and they will tell you they spend half or less the time on an MBR plant than they do on conventional plants. But those operators will also tell you that they have a schedule, they have a list, and they stick to the list and they stick to the schedule.
One more question, please.
Mhm.
What, with the pumping and aeration, what is the energy consumption opposed to a conventional system typically?
Typically, it's about somewhere between 60 and 80% of the cost total of a conventional plant. You're going to have, first of all, the blowers themselves are going to be more, well, let's back up. The biggest energy cost in any wastewater treatment plant is aeration. That's the biggest cost. Second biggest cost is water movement. So those are your two biggest costs. And then you get into chemicals, whether it's chlorine or dechlor or other things like that. All right. So we're aerating about half the volume of water that a conventional plant is going to do. So number one, we've already reduced that cost. Number two, we use tri-low blowers, which are more efficient electrically than just a side channel blower, one of those other PD type of blowers. So you're saving money there. They're going to run on VFDs. They're not wide open at 60 hertz like other blowers. They're going to modulate, right? We typically run 45 hertz, maybe 50. So you're saving money on aeration. That's your biggest cost. The second biggest cost, pumps. We have the influent pumps that are coming to the station. You have the effluent pumps that take it out. That's it, right? Now you have some mixers to keep it started, but that's it. So those are your two biggest costs, and we save you money on both of those. Where we offset is the fact that ours is, again, it's when we replace a valve, it's a stainless steel valve. So when you have to replace that every so often, it's going to cost more than one of your other valves, your conventional valves. So your operational cost is two things. It's your normal, utility type of bills. And then you're going to have what you would consider your consumables and replaceables. Your consumables and replaceables are all those repair items, maintenance items, replacement of life. Almost every single part of a treatment plant, you're going to have to replace in 25 years, except for the actual tankage, almost. So at some point, you're going to replace, pumps, you're going to replace blowers, you're going to replace valves, you're going to replace sensors. So when you replace those are going to be more expensive to replace with ours, but your operational cost is going to make up for that. So we're still less expensive overall, but you're just shifting money more toward the replacement side versus the actual consumption utility side.
With all this incremental clean water that we're producing now, what are the revenue opportunities to offset the investment in the operating costs? What's some creative ways for us to sell this additional water that we've got?
We've seen all kinds. I think it really depends on how much you want to spend on infrastructure. Infrastructure is the key in selling the water, right? Or monetizing the water. If you want to put in the infrastructure, how far do you have to go? Like if I wanted to build some ball fields, and I had area close to one of those and I wanted to put my parks over there, first of all, the water's for free. Or if you had developments going in you're running trunk lines there anyway, and you wanted to put the infrastructure in, that's how you monetize it. So, there's probably any number of ways. I would say think outside the box. Look at ways you're having to use water now and just ask yourself, okay, if we're using this water this way, can we use this other water for that purpose? And that's a question really only you can answer. We can help guide you and steer you as you need to down the road, but I think you need to look and see how do you use water now, or how might you use it in the future, and how you could use this water to replace potable water.
Thank you.
How often is your PM program done for cleaning your sensors and everything else? Is this like once a month? Is this once a week? What are y'all setting this up for so these guys know what they're getting in?
Yeah. So, the sensors are typically about every 2 weeks. You need to go in and clean the sensors. That takes probably about 15 minutes. And there's 4 sensors. Your level transducers. So, you've got a few things. So, 30 to 40 minutes every 2 weeks on that. You got to clean the screens every 2 weeks. That takes probably about 30 minutes for the screens. Every 10,000 hours, you change oil on the blowers. We can kind of give you a whole breakdown. There's a weekly, there's a monthly, there's a quarterly, there's a annually. It varies. It varies. Every one of them's a little different. Okay, I'm going to turn everything over to Robert Hanvey with Train. He's the one who provides everything else you guys need. He makes all this magic for you.
Possibly. So in the spirit of teamwork, I'll try and be brief. So I'm with Train Technologies. So the first obvious question is, why is an HVAC equipment manufacturer talking to you about wastewater treatment plants? But think of us more as a construction company, an engineering company. When we install very large HVAC systems in airport terminals, for example, we do the full construction, construction management, project management, all that kind of stuff. So think of us more as a construction company and a project management company. The other thing that we bring, go ahead, is we have a cooperative purchasing agreement, which is run through Omnia Partners. I'm going to assume that you're at least relatively familiar with these, because about 20% of government agency procurement goes through these. Last year it was about $65 billion. So we actually have several cooperative agreements with Omnia that allow us to offer these kind of projects, these kind of construction projects. Really encompasses the full breadth of all of the stuff that Train can do as a multinational engineering company, if you like. And so with Omnia, we have a couple of contracts that allow us to offer design, build, and energy services. The benefit to you as a city is that these contracts went through a full solicitation process, went through a full RFP. They're kind of operated on a national basis. So we were competing nationally for these. We were awarded the contracts. What it allows you to do is benefit from that, piggyback from those original contracts with the lead agencies, as they're called. It negates you having to go out to RFP for these kinds of projects. So it's going to significantly reduce your costs of procurement. It's going to significantly reduce the lead time for procurement. And it also, within that contract, because it was competitively solicited, it de-risks the procurement because it's been fully vetted at a broader scale and on a national basis, if you like. So I have to say, these slides weren't put together by me, so I may not necessarily follow the flow of them. The first thing I'll change actually would be the title of this slide. I would change it from being about Train, and I would title this one, "What's in it for Smithville?" So what's in it for Smithville is, what it allows you to do is focus on the solution that you want, the solution that's right for your city, as opposed to being restricted by legislature, state requirements. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So It allows you to focus on the solution that you decide is right for your city and not go through an RFP process that is ultimately going to drive you towards the lowest cost solution, which may not be what you really want and may hold some surprises in it, in that there's going to be a load of change orders because it was low price for a reason. This negates that. We also, within our original contract, we have a guaranteed maximum price. What that means is that around the 60% design completion phase, we're going to lock in that price. Any change orders that we request thereafter are on us. So you not only get a guaranteed price, but because costs within that agreement have been set within the original agreement. So this really relates primarily to labor and installation costs. It doesn't include equipment because obviously we can't include every piece of equipment that we might possibly want to offer. But your labor costs are within a structure, within a price list that's based on RS means. So these are industry standard prices. There's also a discount in there. So you've got a lot of price risk removed from this kind of contract. It also doesn't prevent you from applying for any applicable incentives, grants and rebates. And in fact, that's something that Train can help you with because we do a lot of that with our kind of regular HVAC work. So we're very familiar with that. So this design build process is actually from some wastewater treatment plants that we built up in Washington, and it doesn't actually accurately describe what we would do within Texas requirements. Within Texas, we have to separate out the design aspect of it from the construction aspect of it. So they would be two separate contracts. So, but actually these responsibilities, some of these would fall on Reuse as essentially your design engineer. And then Train would come in as your construction contractor and your project manager there. We would work obviously alongside Reuse in the design phase because all of that pre-construction, all the pre-construction aspects, we would be working with them and with you to make sure that we're reducing costs and doing that effectively. Let me see if there's anything else missing from that. Yeah, so I think, so that it would be more of a two-step process with the way that we'd have to work under Texas requirements. And then finally, there's a lot of words on here. Most of them we've actually sort of covered already, as quick as that was. One of the things I would say, though, is that with Train, what we bring to this, obviously, is a large $14 billion company. And so when it comes to completing the design phase, we will be able to pre-order some of the long lead time items. Any requirements around surety bonding, obviously with a big company like us, that's not going to be a problem. You also have the rigor and the stringency of our supplier management process, which can be quite arduous, but it does de-risk it again for you in that all of the suppliers that we work with and subcontractors have been fully vetted. And quite honestly, any equipment or subcontractor we work with, we would always have two others as backup to them. So there's a lot of assurance around us project managing it and having and contingency managing, I should say. So from a city perspective, I guess what you want to do is maximize the benefits and minimize the risks. And this, this slide addresses that. This is obviously fully compliant. So first of all, this is going to comply with any state legislation on how you go out to bid and how you procure, I should say, I guess, is probably more significant. You've got cost risk within the structure of within Omnia. You've got budget assurance. We're going to provide you with that price guarantee. And you have the confidence of working with a large multinational company, Fortune 500 company like Train.
You ready for questions? Ready for a question? So effectively, Train is the assessment, planning, and design process. That's what you guys do.
No, so the design is going to be Reuse. So Reuse will be the designer of the system.
Okay.
Work with them. When we get into the construction phase, Reuse is a consultant to us, if you like. So they will be involved from start to finish.
How do you eliminate the RFQ requirement?
It's within these cooperative agreements you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to piggyback. The original agreement that we have has gone through that procurement process. So it's been fully vetted and it follows all the requirements around that. You're piggybacking off it. So it'd be.
I got the nod from the city manager, so that's what I needed. Thank you.
It's like buy board or choice partners. They're pre-screened and approved and are allowed through procurement to do that where you don't have to competitively bid because they've already been vetted.
Exactly, yeah.
This may not be perfectly on target, but in this day and age where we're hearing so much about tariffs and possible price increases, give us a little bit of insight into where the parts and the materials are coming from for a system like this, and what kind of price volatility do you foresee?
Difficult to say, but I think it's, yeah.
Yeah. Get that question all the time. So the parts are typically going to be sourced from Germany and France. That is the blowers, the permeate pumps. The controls are built here in the United States. The membranes are built here in the United States. So all of that is sourced here in the U.S. The blowers and the pumps are the two things that are coming from Germany. That being said, right now we know that, there's the potential for tariffs. We've actually built into our pricing at 35%. We hope that, there comes to be an agreement that goes down. But right now we've priced everything at 35% tariffs on those items that are coming from Germany, which again are the blowers and the pumps.
Yeah, and so where I was going with this was with the GMAX pricing, which is obviously, generally perceived as a de-risker. We all know that there are some caveats. I think he alluded to at the 60% mark is when you lock things in.
Yes.
So how much financial commitment would the city have before we got to that 60% GMAX threshold? I don't.
How much would city be responsible for? How much would they have?
So before we got to the 60% threshold where we really know we have a GMAX, how much of a legal commitment to the deal have we made, and how much money have we spent?
So, I mean, I think the short answer is at that point, you could still back out. So the way that it's structured, you wouldn't have to pay for the engineering study at the front end. It would be built into the construction contract. So if you did back out at that point, you would pay for the engineering work and you would own any kind of intellectual property that was associated with that, but you could back out at that point.
And so given the add-ons of tariffs, which is certainly a unique environment we're in today, cost savings under GMAX, how does that work? If we end up with less than the 35%, do we get 100% of that, or is there a cost sharing arrangement with the contractor?
I think that's a question that is going to be new to all of us. We're trying to feel our way through that. What we have told our clients at this point is we're planning for X. If it comes in less than X, then we will rebate that to you or we'll discount that to you. But that's only from our equipment side. I can't say when we get to that what that X might look like.
Yeah.
And again, this is all new territory for us, so we're kind of working through.
So let's take the tariffs off the table. You can have cost savings when you don't have a tariff environment. I mean, it happens all the time in contracts. So as a policy matter, do cost savings under the contract accrue to us, or is there some sort of cost savings sharing arrangement where you benefit from some of that through the buyout?
Again, new territory for all of us.
All negotiable?
All negotiable.
Okay.
But I will also say that whether you look at reuse and the membranes or whether you look at a conventional plant, what most people don't realize is most all the pumps that are being manufactured right now for wastewater, almost all your blowers are coming from overseas anyway. So you're going to have that issue regardless of who you're going to use. Most of your controls are being sourced from Siemens or Rockwell Automation or Automation Direct, those type of people. And 70% of those are manufactured in Asian countries. So this is a question, whether it's reuse or anybody else that's out there, this is a question that I think is good for you to be asking because you're going to be facing it no matter who you go with. It is going to be the landscape that we're going to have to deal with over the next 12 months or more.
Yeah, the importance of this is I can be very sympathetic to the position you're in because you really don't know. People that are issuing GMAX contracts are really at risk today because of the volatility of the environment with tariffs. So there is a tendency to want to pad that and
Mhm.
cushion that risk, which is fair. But if it turns out to not be incurred, I want all of that cushion to come back to us, not for you to profit because you
Mhm.
cushioned the price from the beginning.
Mhm.
That was the point. It isn't whether we went with this type of system or another. It's just
Mhm.
contract management in general. We want to be the beneficiary of cost savings.
Mhm.
With the Omnia agreement, there is a certain transparency that's required and open book costing. And so you would have some visibility to that.
Mayor, are we looking for potential action on this, or can we have further discussion amongst us, or do we have citizen?
Kristen?
Kristen Merriweather, Smithville, Texas News. I think the big thing that I was just gonna ask, all of this was really interesting. I think the big question is how are we gonna pay for it? And I don't think we're gonna discuss that here today. Didn't sound like there's gonna be an action item. So I think as we go through budget season, this is obviously going to be fairly expensive. So how are we gonna pay for it is the next step in question. I didn't know if we were gonna have citizens' comments before, and I was gonna see if y'all could discuss that, but we're at the end of the discussion, so food for thought as we move forward, so.
Yeah. Mayor, if I may, ask my colleagues, I mean, I'm inclined to offer a motion that would direct the city manager to engage with reuse and train and frankly, any other competitors in this technology to continue to pursue and research this as an option to whatever we might have to do to repair and upgrade our current conventional plants.
Can I ask a question? What, Robert, did you envision you wanted to take away from tonight's meeting? Because I'm assuming we're not here to pick a particular vendor. We're just here to introduce a different technology, one that has obviously some cost benefits to the city potentially, and to learn a little bit more about it. Is that really the primary purpose tonight?
That was, that was a primary purpose. The secondary purpose is to understand that the conventional report that Bethco did for us, the price tag was, north of $35 million. However, there are pieces in this report that, we've got trunk lines we have to replace. So the total amount of money to do the expansion is going to be far less than that required to fix the trunk lines and everything else that we have. So I don't know if you guys have gotten that far. I did forward a copy of, not a copy, but a link to the study. So they've taken a look at what the conventional cost of all of the repairs, the three priority repairs that we had, 1, 2, and 3, which includes the expansion of Willows and the rehab of Gasly. But that's going to change now with the introduction of new technology. So to answer your question, I wanted to get the technology out so you guys and gals could understand that it's out there and then get some direction as to how we want to push forward, because we have applied for grants, about $10 million in disaster recovery reallocation program funding, which we're still in the running for. That would attack all of the priority 1 items that were listed from the BEFCO report. Where we find the rest of it, I was hoping there were some solutions that Train had, or you go to a bond, you go to a C of O, you do something else that's going to help fund this in the future. So
How about a $14 billion company making us an interest-free loan to construct this system over 30 years?
Yeah, I
I'll
wish we could
second
do that.
You might get an action item tonight. No, before you answer, just real quick, Robert, reminded me of something I wrote down, which is understanding the distinction between treatment and distribution or transporting liquids, whatever those are, water or wastewater. And the third component is we have this fix that we talked about with the BEFCO study that we spent a lot of time looking at. And I think to the extent that any motion you or another might make, authorize the city manager to reassess that work in light of this technology, I think would be a really smart thing to do, is to try to figure out, if we need to do something to kind of fix our short-term problems, is there a way to use this technology to make that short-term fix more cost effective?
One of the things that we really need to keep an eye on too is before the legislature right now is a bill that's going to modify how C of Os are done, our certificates of obligation, that they will only be under great catastrophe or all sorts of other things, or they have to go to a vote. So all of that will come up. If it passes, it'll be in law by September. So it's something we have to consider when we move forward about financial things.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is, I mean, there's obviously different funding options that we can bring. Didn't want to go into those tonight without knowing the scope of the project and so on. But that's obviously that is part of what we could bring and grant options available to you at the state and the federal level.
I'll follow on with a question that Councilmember Etheridge brought up. Who's your biggest competitor? Are you the gorilla? Are y'all the?
Well, I mean, you can look at, I mean, there's public information who we competed against for these particular contracts. So it's, all the big ESCOs that you would expect that you would expect. I mean, so it's Ameresco, Schneider, Honeywell.
No, I didn't mean train. I meant reuse, the technology. I know your end of it. Yeah. Sorry.
We have nobody like us.
I didn't mean, I wasn't calling you a gorilla.
Payback. Really, I mean, our competitors are anybody in the, in the wastewater business, right? So, I mean, all your conventional plants, really what it boils down to is there's only probably, 4 major membranes in the market right now. You've got Torre makes a membrane product. Ovivo makes a membrane product. Siemens still has a little bit of a hand in there. Most of them are either hollow fiber type of membranes, which were membranes that were originally designed for water. Go ahead.
And they're not local.
They're not local.
Georgetown.
Robert, when Bevco when Bevco gave their presentation, there was the wastewater expert, and I can't remember his name. He's been around forever and ever. Do you remember who that was, Robert?
Sorry,
The wastewater expert that you had here the night of Bevco. What's that engineer's name? No, he's been in Austin for a long time. He's a wastewater guy. He's super respect. My point was, it was the night of the Bevco. We can go pull up the record. It would be nice to have someone like that do some sort of a somewhat peer review or peer analysis or kind of weigh in, somebody that's not directly involved in the potential transaction.
Land, land.
Yeah. That guy at Land, that's exactly who it is.
Gotcha.
Yeah, one of the other things, I think if you really want an independent perspective, talk to some of the plans and specs people at TCEQ. They're completely independent. They review all the different technologies.
At where?
At TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They're the ones who.
Oh, TCEQ. Okay.
Yeah, it's that Louisiana accent. But yeah, they're they have a good independence. One of the things I think when you look at experts from around the field, expertise is based only on your knowledge base, right? So I could tell you right now that Rob Bergen, for example, he has been designing wastewater treatment plants. He's one of the owners at Reuse. He's been designing wastewater treatment plants for 45 plus years. So the first 35 years, he did nothing but conventional plants. And if you had asked him 10 years ago about these plants, he probably couldn't tell you too much. And if you asked him for his expertise, he would probably relate it to you, his knowledge based on his previous experience, because he just didn't have any knowledge in these type of systems. But for the last 10 or 11 years, he's been designing nothing but these membranes because, he was introduced to them. And at that point, it was like, well, we're not going to go back to anything else. So when you look at experts, please understand that anybody in wastewater with a really good experience can talk to you about the biology like I talked to you about, can talk to you about the mechanics of water solid separation like I spoke to. But if they don't have experience in membrane technology, and even in the whole set of membranes, there's a lot of subsets in there. There's water membranes, there's flat sheet membranes, rigid plate membranes, there's spiral well membranes, there's ceramic membranes. there's just a variety of fields. So just as you take a look at it, I do encourage you to do your research. But also understand that expertise is only as valuable as your experience and your breadth of knowledge in that particular field. Not just wastewater, but even the subsets.
Mayor, would you entertain a motion?
Hold on, let me make one more statement. I want to make sure I get the right assignment. So in this list of things that we have to fix or upgrade, the wastewater expansion portion of it is about $12 million. Everything else is rehab to lift stations, trunk lines, this, that, and the other. So I would like to work with reuse and train to figure out what the cost is really going to be based upon what we need by kind of getting down in more in the weeds with this document to figure out, this is what we need. How can you guys help? And at what cost?
And I'll word the motion so it's pretty general, but allows you the freedom to go pursue that. If I may. I'm sorry, if anybody, of course, the motion just opens discussion, so.
I just want to add that I did reach out to a friend and a colleague I used to work with that was also the executive director of TCEQ for many years, and that there's very few disadvantages. Your particular system is highly rated, and actually there was very little negative comment. In fact, it was all very positive. So that means a lot to me because of this person that I know, and I just wanted to share that.
I'm sure you'll second the motion then.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor. All right, I move that we direct the city manager to reassess the current conventional proposals from BEFCO and continue research of this new technology as an option to conventional plant repairs and upgrades and report back to us. I'm going to offer the June meeting, Robert. I don't know if that's unrealistic or not.
Good.
So that's my motion.
I second that motion.
A motion has been made and second. All in favor? 1, 2. That's approved. We did citizens comment, correct? Any other things we need to discuss? All right, meeting adjourned.